A worker in the Nile Delta wakes before dawn. He has 3 hours before the corvée labor begins. Breakfast is waiting, and it's nothing like the tomb paintings suggest. Thebes, 1450 BCE. A limestone worker's household in the shadow of the Valley of the Kings. His wife is already at the hearth. The bread from yesterday is hard. She dunks it in water, softens it, adds a handful of onions. This is breakfast, not for slaves, for the middle rank. For people who built the monuments we still photograph. Most of what we think we know about Egyptian food comes from tomb paintings and temple reliefs. Roasted ducks, honeycakes, wine in amphorae, figs piled high. The problem is obvious once you notice it. Tombs were built by and for the wealthy. The Pharaoh's feast tells you about the Pharaoh. It tells you almost nothing about the 98% of people who actually lived there. The real Egyptian kitchen was built around 3 staples: bread, onions, beer, not the craft beer of modern memory. Thick, cloudy, low-alcohol grain drink, closer to porridge you could drink. Workers received daily rations of bread and beer as payment. They were, in a real sense, paid in breakfast. Bread in Egypt was not the risen, light loaf of later Rome. It was dense, coarse, ground between 2 stones with grit still in it. Dental remains from mummies show massive wear. Archaeologists initially thought it was disease. It was flour. Each bite abraded the enamel. By age 40, most Egyptians had worn their teeth to nubs. The bread was made from emmer wheat, not the wheat you buy today. Emmer is smaller, harder, more prone to shattering. It grows well in Egypt's climate, but demands more work to thresh. Women did most of the milling. The rotary quern, a hand mill, appears in 2 models. A woman kneeling, grinding. It was not ceremonial. It was 8 hours a day every day. Lunch, if you were working, was often bread and beer consumed in the field. A worker on a construction gang might receive a fresh loaf and a jug of beer mid-morning. The beer provided calories and hydration. The water from the Nile was not always safe. Fermentation made it drinkable. Necessity became nutrition, became culture. Dinner was where variation entered. If you had access to the river, you had fish. Salted, dried, or fresh. Archaeological sites near the Nile show fish bones in every refuse pit. Bone hooks, nets, and weirs are common finds. Fish was cheap protein, a luxury only by comparison to bread alone. Vegetables came from gardens near settlements. Lettuce, cucumbers, garlic, leeks, legumes, chickpeas, and lentils appear in seed jars found in tombs. They were dried, stored, and cooked into pottages. A pottage is a thick stew. Vegetables boiled until soft, flavored with salt and oil if you had it. Most Egyptians didn't have much oil. Oil came from flax seeds or sesame. It was expensive. Honey was the primary sweetener, and it too was a luxury for most. The wealthy had honey. The poor had the occasional date. Dates grew in the oases and along the Nile margins. They were sweet, storable, and free if you lived near the palms. Meat was rare. Pork was raised in the marshes and in home pens. Beef was expensive. Cattle were wealth, tools, and currency. They were not eaten casually. Poultry, ducks, and geese were kept by those with space. Most Egyptians ate meat a few times a year, usually during festivals or after religious offerings, when the meat was distributed to the community. Cooking happened over fire, in clay pots with minimal equipment. A hearth, a few vessels, spits for roasting. The kitchen was not a room. It was a corner of the house, often outside to vent smoke. Large communal ovens existed in towns. Bread was baked there. Women brought their dough and paid a fee, usually a portion of the loaf. Boiling was the primary cooking method for everything else. A pot of water, vegetables, grains, legumes, sometimes meat bones for broth. Salt was precious but available from salt pans near the coast and from natron deposits. Spices were rare inland. Coriander and fenugreek appear in some records. Most food was unseasoned by modern standards. Salt, heat, that was the palate. Storage was critical, no refrigeration. Drying was the method. Fish dried in the sun, meat salted and dried. Grains stored in sealed vessels with lids that kept out pests. Bread hardened. It was eaten softened the next day or the day after. Nothing was wasted. Stale bread was currency. It fed you and it fed the birds. The wealthy ate differently. Temple records show provisions for officials. Multiple types of bread, meat regularly, wine instead of beer, cakes with honey, fruit. The gap between a laborer's diet and a scribe's diet was as wide as the gap between a scribe and a pharaoh. But the laborer's diet was not poverty by the standards of most ancient peoples. It was functional. It sustained. What strikes you when you reconstruct the actual meals is the monotony, not the deprivation. Monotony. The same bread, same beer, same onions. Dinner might be fish or pottage or both, but the core was always there. Bread. It was not a meal. It was the meal. Everything else was addition. Yet there's something else in the records. Feast days. Holidays tied to the Nile flood, to harvest, to religious calendars. On these days, meat was available. Beer was abundant. The monotony broke. People ate differently because they could and because the calendar demanded it. The Egyptian year was not just seasons. It was punctuated by eating. We return to that worker in Thebes. His wife has finished preparing breakfast. Bread, softened, onions, a cup of beer. He eats standing. He has to leave soon. It's not a meal that sounds remarkable. It's not meant to be. It's meant to sustain him through the day. And it did. For thousands of years it did. The Pharaoh's feast tells you about power and abundance. The worker's breakfast tells you about survival and rhythm. Both are Egypt. Both are true. But only one fed 98% of the people. Only one shaped the actual lives lived in the shadow of those pyramids. Subscribe to uncover the forgotten meals, homes, and daily rituals that shaped ancient civilizations. The stories the monuments don't tell.